After I raised my brother's kids for 7 years, he introduced me as just the nanny at his daughter's wedding and claimed I was paid generously, in cash to keep me quiet. You didn't really think you were family, he laughed. Then he bragged about being a single dad. I was erased from her life, until I pulled out the photos. I didn't even recognize her at first. My niece, no, my daughter in every way that mattered, was walking down the aisle, glowing, beautiful, her arm hooked through my brother's. The same brother who hadn't spoken to me in nearly a year. The same brother who told me not to come, but my heart couldn't stay away. I stood at the back of the church, half hidden behind the last row of guests, clutching the small bouquet I brought as a peace offering. It had been 7 years since I'd first moved into his house to help after his wife died. 7 years of packed lunches, science projects, ballet recitals, and long nights of nightmares I soothed while he was out working. I wasn't her nanny. I was the only parent she really had. But that day, as the ceremony ended and the crowd spilled into the reception hall, my brother spotted me. His face froze for a second, surprise, then anger before he plastered on that fake, politician smile he always used when he was trying to control a situation. He walked straight toward me, his hand gripping the small of his new wife's back. "Everyone," he said loudly, too loudly, "this is Claire. She used to help out with the kids when they were younger, kind of like a live-in nanny, right, Claire?" The word nanny hit like a slap. People turned, smiled politely. Some nodded like they understood, like I was some distant employee from the past. And before I could say anything, before I could breathe, he laughed. "Oh, don't look so serious," he said, patting my arm. "She was paid generously. We made sure she was taken care of. Right, Claire?" I felt my throat close. Paid, taken care of, I hadn't seen a single cent in those years. I had given up my career, my apartment, my savings, everything, to raise his kids while he grieved. Then came the line that made something in me snap. He leaned in, voice low but sharp as a knife. "You didn't really think you were family, did you?" His new wife smiled, that smug, tight smile women wear when they think they've won. And beside them, my niece, radiant in white, glanced at me, then looked away. No recognition. No warmth, just distance. He put an arm around her and said to a group of guests, "Couldn't have done it without her, you know. Being a single dad was tough." Single dad. I stood there dizzy, the noise of laughter and music closing in. 7 years of my life erased in a sentence. 7 years of birthdays, fevers, broken hearts, rewritten into a story where I didn't exist. I should have left. I should have walked out and never looked back. But instead, I went home that night and opened an old shoebox from under my bed, the one filled with photographs, school drawings, letters that said, "Aunt Claire, you're my favorite person." And right there, holding that box, an idea began forming, slow, cold, and dangerous. Because if he wanted to erase me from the story, I was going to rewrite it. When my brother, Mark, called me crying 7 years ago, I dropped everything. He just lost his wife, Amy, in a car accident. Their daughter, Lily, was 6. Their son, Jake, barely 2. At the time, I was 30, living in Denver, working as a medical billing specialist. I didn't have kids, wasn't married, but I was stable and Mark wasn't. He was a mess. Drinking, skipping work, spiraling. He begged me to come help just for a few months while he got back on his feet. I quit my job the next day. It was supposed to be temporary, but months turned into years. At first, I didn't mind. Those kids, they healed me as much as I helped them. Lily clung to me every night, whispering that she missed her mom. Jake followed me everywhere, his tiny hands always reaching for mine. Mark, on the other hand, spent more and more time networking, which I later learned meant bar hopping with coworkers and sleeping with whoever would numb him for the night. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, managed school schedules, doctor's appointments, birthday parties. Every single holiday, it was me who stayed up till 2 a.m. wrapping presents or sewing costumes for school plays. When the money started running tight, I picked up remote work, typing reports, tutoring online, but it all went into the house account. Mark controlled the finances. He'd say things like, "You don't have rent, you don't need your own account," and I believed it. I believed him. We fought sometimes, especially when he started seeing this woman, Stacy. She was 28, blonde, loud, and made sure everyone knew she thought being a stepmom was beneath her. She'd mock me for being house help, though she knew damn well I wasn't being paid. One night, after the kids went to bed, I finally confronted Mark about it. I told him I was drowning, that I couldn't keep doing everything for free, that I needed some kind of plan for my own future. He rolled his eyes, poured himself another whiskey, and said, "Your family, Claire. Family helps family. Why are you making this transactional? Family." That word used to mean something to me, but as time went on, I started noticing how he introduced me to people. "Oh, that's my sister. She's helping out with the kids." Never, "She's raising them." Never, "I couldn't do this without her." Always helping out. And when Stacy moved in, it got worse. She'd leave me lists on the fridge, chores, errands, as if I were hired help. Mark didn't stop her. If anything, he seemed to enjoy watching me play the quiet martyr. The breaking point came when Lily turned 13. I overheard Mark and Stacy whispering in the kitchen one night, arguing about money. He said something that still echoes in my head. "Once she's gone, it'll be easier. She doesn't even have legal guardianship. She's just extra." That was when I realized the truth. I wasn't family anymore. I was convenient labor. But I stayed for Lily and Jake. They were my world. I couldn't just walk away and abandon them the way their father emotionally had. So I endured. I smiled through birthdays and parent-teacher meetings. I listened to Stacy's snide comments. I ignored the exhaustion, the resentment, the loneliness, until the day Mark told me Lily was getting married. He didn't invite me to the engagement party, then the bridal shower, then the rehearsal dinner. Each time there was a new excuse. "It's just close friends. You wouldn't know anyone. It's better for Lily if we keep things simple." I told myself maybe Lily was just caught up in wedding stress. Maybe she'd reach out, but she didn't. And now, standing there at the wedding, realizing I was nothing but the nanny, I knew Mark had been rewriting my place in their story for years. He'd erased me long before I noticed. After that wedding, something in me broke, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't a sobbing, desperate kind of heartbreak. It was quiet, controlled, like a door inside me had finally clicked shut. I didn't scream or confront anyone that night. I just went home, sat in my small rented duplex, and opened that shoebox. It was full of proof, years' worth. School photos, report cards I'd signed because Mark never showed up, handmade cards that said, "I love you, Auntie Claire. Thank you for being my mom, too." Every memory he'd tried to erase was there, printed and dated. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it, but I knew I wasn't going to let him bury me. Not again. The next morning, I started digging. Old messages, emails, even tax records. I still had access to one of the old online accounts tied to Mark's name. It didn't take long before I noticed something strange. Several large childcare expense deductions filed under his taxes for the years I'd lived there. Thousands of dollars. He'd been writing me off as an employee to get tax breaks. I wasn't on payroll, of course, but the forms claimed I'd been compensated $38,000 one year, $42,000 the next. And it got worse. There were references to nanny wages paid in cash, all fabricated. He'd forged signatures, maybe even receipts, which meant he hadn't just erased me, he'd turned me into a lie on his tax forms. That's when the anger really started to bloom. I reached out to Lily through social media first, just a simple message. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You looked beautiful. I miss you." She didn't respond. 3 days later, I got a message from Mark instead. "Do not contact my family again. You are lucky we don't press charges for showing up uninvited. Move on with your life, Claire." "No, thank you. No, we appreciate what you did." Just a threat. I read that message over and over until my hands shook. So I started pulling more records, old photos, old voicemails of the kids calling me Mommy Claire, even the email threads where Mark begged me to stay a little longer. Every piece of digital evidence I could find that proved what really happened in that house. And as I collected it all, something inside me hardened into purpose. I didn't want money. I didn't want revenge out of pettiness. I wanted truth. But truth doesn't survive quietly, it has to be seen. The first step came accidentally. A friend of mine, Emily, worked as a journalist for a local paper. I told her bits and pieces, how I'd raised my brother's kids and then been erased. She asked for proof. I gave her everything. Within a week, she called back. "Claire, you realize what this means, right? He committed tax fraud, false dependency claims. This isn't just family drama, it's criminal." My heart pounded. I hadn't thought of it that way, I just wanted people to know. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife further, I saw a post pop up on Facebook. A glossy photo of Mark, Stacy, and the kids at the wedding, captioned, "Family means everything." Couldn't have done this without the strength of a single dad. It had hundreds of likes, comments calling him an inspiration. That's when I knew what I had to do. He wanted to paint himself as a hero, a grieving single father who raised his kids alone. But I had the truth sitting in a shoebox and a digital trail he couldn't erase. So while he was out there bragging, I started writing. Carefully, meticulously. My story, our story, the real one. I didn't know it yet, but my decision to publish it, even anonymously, would set off a chain reaction I could never have imagined. And it all started with a single headline that hit the local news 2 weeks later. It read, "Single dad hero accused of defrauding IRS. Sister claims she raised his kids without pay." The morning the article dropped, my phone exploded. Calls, texts, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. My coworkers whispering at the office, family friends reaching out just to check in. My brother's name was splashed across local news sites, Community Dad of the Year under investigation for tax fraud. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life crumble on a screen. But it was real. The article detailed how he'd claimed thousands in fake childcare expenses, using fabricated nanny wages to dodge taxes. The reporter quoted me anonymously, just as I'd asked. Still, everyone knew it was me. Mark called that night. I didn't answer the first 2 times. The third time I did. He didn't yell right away, that's what made it worse. His voice was calm, cold. "You think you're smart, Claire. You think this is justice." I didn't say anything, I just let him talk. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. "You've ruined my reputation. You've humiliated your niece right before her honeymoon." That made me laugh, a bitter, empty sound. "Your niece? The one I raised while you were too drunk to wake up for school drop-off." He went silent. Then, "You always needed to feel like a martyr. Well, congratulations, you got your spotlight." And then he hung up. I didn't hear from him again for almost a week. Then came the letter. A formal, typed notice from his lawyer, accusing me of defamation, false public statements, and emotional harm inflicted upon the family. I could barely breathe reading it. It was like he'd reached into my chest and twisted everything I'd done into something dirty. The letter ended with a line that made my blood run cold. "Any further attempts to contact family members or disseminate personal material will result in criminal charges." I called Emily, panicked. She said the paper stood by the story, they'd verified the documents. "He's bluffing," she said. "If he sues, Discovery will destroy him." But he wasn't bluffing in the way I thought. A week later, I was leaving work when 2 men approached me in the parking lot, suits, badges, IRS agents. They asked if I'd be willing to come in for a statement about the tax filings. They were polite but firm. "Your brother says you were compensated in cash," one said. "He's provided statements and receipts." Receipts. I went cold. I hadn't signed a single thing in all those years. But when they showed me the photocopies, there it was, my signature. Only it wasn't mine. He'd forged it. On multiple years of tax forms, pay stubs, and even an employment agreement, claiming I'd agreed to a cash salary as his nanny. That was his play. If he could prove I'd been paid, he could bury the fraud and make me look like a bitter liar. He wasn't just trying to save himself, he was trying to destroy me. When I got home that night, I found my voicemail full again. But not from him, from Lily. Her voice was shaking. "Aunt Claire, what did you do? Dad says you're lying about him. He says you're trying to blackmail him for money. Please tell me that's not true." That last part hit hard. I sat there on my couch, holding the phone, realizing that he hadn't just stolen my years, he'd stolen my relationship with her. He'd poisoned her against me completely. That's when I understood the kind of person my brother really was. He didn't want to win. He wanted me erased. Utterly. But I wasn't the same woman who walked into that wedding ashamed and small. He forged my signature, filed fake documents, and lied to the daughter I loved. He wanted to turn me into his scapegoat. He was about to learn what happens when the person you erase remembers everything. After that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel shock anymore. Just focus, that heavy, ice-cold kind of focus that comes when you've got nothing left to lose. He wanted war. I'd give him war. The next morning, I made 3 calls. First to the IRS agent who'd interviewed me. Second to Emily, the journalist. Third to an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, Paul, who worked in the accounting department of a firm that handled small business audits. Paul owed me a favor from way back, and I cashed it in. I told him everything, every dirty detail, the forged signatures, the false receipts, the years of unpaid labor. He didn't even hesitate. "Send me scans," he said, "all of it." Then I got to work. I started building my own case, organized, documented, airtight. Every photo, every email, every scrap of handwriting that could prove the forgery. I still had old texts from Mark. "Don't worry about money this month. I'll cover it. You're doing God's work, sis." Every message made it clearer. I wasn't an employee, I was family. And while I was piecing that together, I started pulling public information. Property records, business filings. Turns out Mark wasn't just claiming me as a nanny for tax breaks. He'd been deducting home renovation costs, car leases, even travel as childcare-related expenses. He wasn't sloppy, but he wasn't as smart as he thought. That's when Emily dropped a bomb on me. "Claire," she said quietly over the phone, "I think you should sit down before you hear this." She told me the paper had received an anonymous tip, someone claiming I'd blackmailed Mark for money in exchange for not publishing the story. There were emails, fake ones, sent from a Gmail address that had my name in it, written in a tone that sounded almost like me. They'd even attached screenshots of draft messages demanding payment. He'd planted it. He was setting me up. If I didn't move carefully, I'd look like the liar he was painting me to be. So I switched strategies. I stopped reacting publicly and started documenting privately. I met with the IRS agent again, this time with my attorney present. I explained the forged signatures, the fake receipts, the timeline, the inconsistencies. The agent's face stayed professional, but I could tell he'd seen this kind of fraud before. That's when I dropped my ace. "Check the handwriting," I said. "The receipts, the agreement. Compare it to his own signatures on his tax filings. You'll see it's the same hand." He nodded slowly, taking notes. It was a small moment, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: leverage. Still, I knew Mark wouldn't stop. He'd double down. He'd twist Lily further, spin the story harder, and drag my name through every piece of mud he could find. So I planned one more move, the kind you can't come back from once you commit. I made copies of everything: the photos, the cards, the emails, the texts. And then I put them all together into a timeline. From the day Amy died to the day of the wedding. Dates, proof, receipts. I uploaded the file to a private link, one only accessible by code. And then I wrote a short note addressed to Lily. "I don't want you to believe me because I'm hurt. I want you to see what really happened. The truth doesn't need my defense, it speaks for itself." I didn't send it yet. I wanted to wait until the right moment, when the walls started closing in around him. And that moment came sooner than I expected. Because 2 weeks later, Emily called again, her voice shaking with something halfway between triumph and fear. "Claire," she said, "you're not going to believe this. The IRS didn't just find forged forms. They found offshore transfers. Your brother's been hiding money." That was the moment I realized this was never just about ego or reputation. Mark had been using those kids, and me, as cover for years of fraud. And now that someone had finally cracked the surface, he was going to burn everything to the ground trying to save himself. When Emily told me about the offshore transfers, I thought she meant a few shady accounts or maybe a hidden savings stash. I was wrong. What the IRS had found was bigger and darker than anything I imagined. Mark hadn't just been siphoning money. He'd been funneling it through Amy's old charity, the small nonprofit she'd started before she died, meant to help families of car accident victims. Amy's death had turned that charity into a local cause. People donated out of sympathy, thinking they were helping widows and kids, and for a while, it had been legitimate. But after she passed, Mark quietly took it over. No one looked too closely. Everyone assumed he was continuing her legacy. Except he wasn't. He was bleeding it dry. According to the documents the IRS found, nearly $180,000 had been transferred overseas to a consulting firm that didn't exist. Another $70,000 had been written off as nanny payroll expenses. Under my name, that money was gone, moved through layers of fake accounts and empty shells, and that's when the other shoe dropped. Emily's voice trembled when she said it. "Claire, the IRS suspects Amy's charity was already being misused before she died. They think it might have started months earlier." I froze. "What do you mean before she died?" She hesitated. "Her car accident, there were questions, insurance delays, missing paperwork. I think Mark was already covering tracks back then." For a long time, I just sat there in silence, phone pressed to my ear, the room spinning. Amy's accident had always felt strange. She'd been driving home late from an event, clear weather, familiar road. No alcohol, no phone use, just lost control, they said. I'd believed it. Why wouldn't I? But suddenly, pieces started falling into place. Mark had been drowning in debt even before she died. He'd talked about restructuring finances. He'd begged Amy to let him handle the charity accounting. She'd refused, told me once she didn't trust his spending. 2 weeks later, she was dead. And right after that, he'd taken control of everything, her accounts, her passwords, her property. Even the kids' life insurance policies. I wanted to tell myself I was being paranoid, that this was just trauma rewiring my brain. But when I pulled up Amy's obituary online, I noticed something I'd never seen before. A GoFundMe link Mark had made for the kids' future. It raised nearly $50,000. None of that money ever went to the kids. My hands shook as I scrolled, heart pounding in my throat. I didn't have proof he'd done anything directly related to her death, but I suddenly understood what kind of man my brother really was. He didn't just manipulate. He exploited. He built his life out of the ashes of other people's pain. And I'd been his cover story. The perfect grieving sister, the live-in nanny who made his single dad lie believable. I hung up with Emily and sat in silence for a long time, staring at that shoebox again, all those photos, all those smiles, all those years of believing I was doing something good. Then my phone buzzed again. It was Lily. No message, just a single photo, one of the pictures from the wedding, me standing in the background, blurred and unnoticed. Her caption read, "I didn't want to believe him. I saw your name in Mom's charity records. Why didn't you tell me?" My heart dropped. He'd turned it again. Somehow, he'd convinced her I was part of it, that I'd taken money from her mom's charity, that I was in on the lie. And that's when I knew the truth about the second twist. This wasn't just Mark trying to save himself. He was preparing to pin everything on me. Every forged document, every missing dollar, every false receipt. He was setting me up as the fall guy for his entire empire of lies. If I didn't move fast, I wasn't just going to lose Lily. I was going to lose everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the photos spread out in front of me like puzzle pieces from a life that had been stolen. Every memory I'd ever made with those kids, every meal, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, was now being used as ammunition against me. He'd painted me as the villain in my own story. And the worst part was people believed him. The next morning, I drove to the federal building downtown. I didn't have an appointment, but I wasn't leaving until someone listened. I handed over everything, the timelines, the screenshots, the handwriting samples, the emails, even the messages from Lily. The IRS agent took them all, his face unreadable. He promised to look into it. I walked out shaking, my body vibrating with anger, not just at what Mark had done, but at why. Because all this time, I thought his cruelty came from pride or ego. I thought it was just about saving face, but I was wrong. It wasn't pride, it was greed, calculated, methodical greed. That night, Emily called again. Her voice was tense, low. "Claire, we got the full picture." I braced myself. The charity, the deductions, the nanny fraud, it's all connected. Mark didn't just fake your pay stubs. He used your name as a tax filter. He needed a living, breathing person he could point to. Someone who would never question missing money because she thought she was doing it for family. She paused. "That's you, Claire. He built the entire scheme around you." It made sickening sense. When Amy died, the charity donations started flowing in. Mark had no way to explain where the money was going. He couldn't pocket it outright. So he invented me, the caretaker, the loyal sister who had left her job to raise the kids. On paper, I was his employee, his expense, his justification for every missing dollar. Every time I bought groceries, paid a bill, took Lily to the dentist, he recorded it as childcare services. Every time he took a trip or moved funds offshore, he listed it as nanny payroll. He hadn't erased me out of spite. He'd erased me because I was evidence. And the reason he called me paid generously at the wedding, because in his books that was true. On paper, I'd been compensated hundreds of thousands of dollars for years of work. That's why he laughed when I confronted him. That's why he said, "You didn't really think you were family, did you?" Because to him, I wasn't. I was an expense line, a loophole, a human shield. He'd been using my name to clean dirty money since the day Amy's body was buried. And when I started asking questions, when I asked for real compensation, when I began to pull away, he didn't see his sister losing faith in him. He saw liability waking up. That was the dramatic reason, the core of his cruelty. He didn't want to hurt me for emotional satisfaction. He wanted to eliminate me before I could expose the truth. It explained everything. The gradual isolation, the manipulative guilt trips, the way he pushed the "your family" line just enough to keep me obedient. He knew I'd never question him if I still believed we were on the same side. But once I stopped being useful, he turned me into a threat, and threats had to be silenced. Emily was quiet on the line for a moment before she said softly, "Claire, the IRS is moving fast. They're going to freeze his accounts. But he's not going down easy. You need to be careful." I hung up and stared at the walls of my small, empty house. For 7 years, I'd given him everything. My time, my savings, my love. He'd taken all of it, turned it into a criminal operation, and wrapped it in the lie of a single dad. Now he was facing federal charges, and I had a choice: disappear quietly or finish this. And I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to finish it, in public, with proof. And when I was done, no one in that city would ever call him Dad of the Year again. I didn't go for a dramatic confrontation. I didn't scream or show up at his house. I'd learned something after all those years. People like Mark only understand consequences when you take away the story they control. So I took his story apart, publicly, piece by piece. It started with a Dropbox link. I uploaded everything: the forged documents, the tax returns, the handwriting comparisons, Amy's original charity records, the photos, the emails where he begged me to stay. And then I sent that link to 3 places: Emily at the paper, the IRS investigator, and Lily. No commentary, no long explanation, just a simple subject line: "Here's the truth." Claire. Within 24 hours, it was everywhere. The newspaper ran a second feature with the headline, "Heroic Single Dad Accused of Exploiting Dead Wife's Charity and Forging Sister's Identity." It hit social media like wildfire. People started digging. Screenshots surfaced of Mark bragging about living off charity donations. Someone found the offshore company he'd used. The comments turned savage. By day 3, his business clients dropped him. His employer issued a public statement distancing themselves. The charity's board released a statement confirming that funds were misappropriated and that they were cooperating with federal authorities. By the end of that week, his accounts were frozen, his passport flagged, and I got a call from the IRS agent. "Miss Taylor, we'll need you to testify when this goes to court." I said yes. The day I walked into that courthouse, I felt like I was carrying 7 years' worth of ghosts on my shoulders. But I didn't feel weak. I felt steady. He avoided looking at me. He sat there in his expensive suit, trying to look like the victim, hands folded, eyes red-rimmed. But his jaw kept tightening whenever evidence was shown. The judge listened as the prosecution read out the fake receipts, the forged signatures, the bank transfers. When my turn came, I told the truth. Flat, simple, unembellished. How he'd begged me to move in. How he'd promised family, not wages. How I'd believed him until he turned me into a financial puppet. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I just told them how it happened, how it felt to be erased by your own blood. By the end of the hearing, it was clear. He was going to be indicted, multiple counts of tax fraud, wire fraud, and charity fund embezzlement. He was released on bail while the formal charges processed. And that's when the final piece fell into place. Lily showed up at my door. She looked smaller than I remembered, exhausted, mascara streaked. She held her phone in one hand, shaking. "I read everything," she whispered. "I saw Mom's charity records. I'm so sorry, Aunt Claire, I didn't know." I let her cry. I didn't say I told you so. I just held her like I used to when she was 6 and scared of the dark. She told me Mark had been calling, threatening to fix everything and begging her to side with him. She blocked him, for good this time. A month later, the charity's remaining members reached out. They wanted to relaunch the foundation, properly, transparently, and they asked if I'd serve on the new board. I said yes. But I didn't use my last name. Not his, not anymore. When Mark's trial finally came around, I didn't even go inside. Emily covered it for the paper. He took a plea deal, 15 years, no parole for the first 10. The moment it hit the news, I went home, opened the shoebox one last time and took out one photo, me, Lily, and Jake at the park before everything fell apart. I framed it and threw the rest away. 7 years of my life reduced to one image, but it was enough. That weekend, Lily visited again. She brought Jake, now grown, quiet but kind. We sat on my porch drinking lemonade. For the first time in years, there was no tension. No pretending, just air. Before they left, Lily looked at me and said, "You weren't just the nanny." I smiled. "No," I said. "I was the one who stayed." And for once, that was enough. Because Mark had written me out of his story. But I'd rewritten mine, and this time, he didn't exist in it at all.